Welcome to another episode of JAX TV. I'm here with Dave Syer at JAX 2015. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Sebastian.
Very nice to meet you. Yesterday you did a session on Spring Cloud. But first of all, please tell us who are you and what are you doing at Pivotal?
So I'm Dave Syer, yeah. I work at Pivotal on the Spring engineering team. So it's actually the same job pretty much that I've had since 2006.
Wow.
Probably. But we keep changing companies.
Yeah.
The Spring engineering team has sort of moved around a little bit, but we've always basically been together. So I've worked on loads of things. Spring Batch was one of my first sort of big projects that I set up and led in the early days. More recently, Spring Boot, I'm still co-lead of that, and then Spring Cloud, we started work on that about a year ago.
Maybe we talk a little bit more about Boot and Cloud. From my perspective, what I think is really interesting about that is, it seems to be that your idea is really offering, let's say, the classic Java developer a familiar environment in order to target newer ways of architectures and deployment models. Could you explain us a little bit more about that, please?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, that sounds like a sketch of Spring Cloud to me, but maybe if we take a step back a little bit maybe and look at how Spring Boot sort of led to Spring Cloud, it's you could sort of see it as successively, I think, sort of raising the level in the technology stack.
Yeah.
So Spring, classic Spring, you're working with Java code, maybe some abstractions, integration abstractions, but lots of configuration, all right? And then Spring Boot sort of lifts you up above that and says, actually, you don't need to do all that configuration. We can do it for you because most of it's boilerplate, all right? But we're still at the level of a single processor, single JVM. And then Spring Cloud, what Spring Cloud does is sort of takes you up the next level. So if you have multiple processors, multiple JVMs, a distributed system, then it does boilerplate things for you again, but at a different level in the stack. So yeah, that's a picture I like to paint of how Spring Cloud kind of sits on top of Spring Boot and Spring Framework.
Maybe if a developer likes to do the very first step with Spring Boot, so what should he or she care for, and what is to learn?
Well, there's a huge amount of material out there now. We did a lot of effort. I think a year, 2 years ago, there was a big peak of effort in the new spring.io website. Yeah. So you can learn a lot just by going to spring.io on the internet and looking at the guides. So we have guides. And actually, there's work in progress now to do the same thing for Spring Cloud. It's going to be a different website, and it hasn't been released yet, so I can't say what the URL is because I don't know what it is, but we're doing another job like that for the cloud stuff, basically. So giving people really coffee time length introductions to various bits of the technology. So if you're interested, you're not just going to be interested in Spring Boot. Well, if you are, then there's a guide for that. But normally you want to say, I need to use, let's say, Spring and JPA, or I need to use Spring and Elasticsearch, or I need to use Spring and JMS. And so all I have to do is take those keywords, plug them into the website, and it'll come up with a list of 15-minute, 20-minute introductions to those things. And I think that has been a really powerful way to get people started. You can go beyond that, of course. Those are only short snapshots, but I think that's the best place to start. If anybody wants to see what we're doing and why, it's probably the best place to look.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking about avoiding boilerplate code, would you say this is kind of a convention over configuration approach?
A lot of it is, yeah, you could categorize it that way. A lot of it is also more, I guess, what I would call auto-configuration. So just picking up signals from the environment and creating stuff for you that you don't even need to know the name of, right? So convention over configuration, to me, that means you have to write something and you have to know what name to give it for it to do something magical. Yeah. So we have some of those features, but we prefer it if things just happen by detecting stuff on the class path, for instance, like working out what the developer wanted to do by noticing that he's put Spring JDBC on the class path, so that means that he wants to do something with a data source, right? That's the most slick, I guess, the quickest route to where you want to get if you're a Spring Boot developer. And then on top of that, you've got some convention over configuration if you want to tweak things, right? So you take the auto configuration, the first thing you can do is get started really quickly, but then you want to go into production, you're probably going to change one thing, two things, and you can do that with, externalized properties which tend to be name-driven, convention-driven.
Okay. Then last question, what's next?
What's next? Well, Spring Cloud is next after Boot, I guess, and that's what we've been working on. We got to 1.0. We're actually having a face-to-face meeting now at the engineering team in a couple of weeks, so we'll see what the priorities are going to be for .next, if I could call it that. We've had a great response from the community, so I think this is a very active area. Lots of people are very interested in it, so I think with a bit of help, we can make quite a big impact this year with more Spring Cloud stuff, I think, and maybe even into next year. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
So thanks for coming, Dave, and enjoy the rest of the conference here in Mainz.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Cool.